What's up guys, the poll has been complete and as you can guess by our title, our winner is Peacekeeper. Over 6,000 of you guys voted, which is 2,000 more than our last poll. That is just absolutely insane to me. I never thought of you guys would come out in such large numbers, but you did, and I thank you all for so much support. Anyways, let's get right into the video, and remember, if you enjoy this video, hit the like button. It costs you nothing and helps get this video out to other people. Now, like before, I make the first part of the analysis of the character something that will help start the conversation about said character. So in this case, before I can even start talking about her armor or weapon choices, I need to set the stage for her fighting style and explain my reasoning here before I can start explaining my reasoning on her gear. So like always when looking at the animations of a hero, we start with the stances. Peacekeeper has a total of 4 stances for being an assassin. She has her neutral stance with no guard, then she has her top guard, her left guard, and her right guard. Before I start talking about the guards themselves, let me talk about some of what I think the background of this fighting style is. Back in my Knight Hero speculation video, I talked about the idea of adding a rapier hero to the game. To paraphrase a bit, I essentially said that it was a bit redundant because Peacekeeper already represents a rapier hero so much with her current fighting style. Now that video is a bit dated at this point. I won't explain why, but if you watch it, it's very obvious. Regardless, that is one thing that still holds somewhat true, and I'll explain more as we go along. Starting off, we have her neutral stance. Now technically there are 2 stances here, but nothing changes except for foot placement. So I'm just going to count it as a one single stance, although if I had to pick which one is more correct, I would say the right foot forward, as that gives your longer sword more reach. As for sword placement itself, it's not bad per se, as it does give her more options to quickly traverse into other guards, but it doesn't really protect herself that much as she really doesn't present her weapon forward to deter the enemy from approaching. So not bad for its intended purposes, but it could be better. Next we're looking at the top guard. This one is actually pretty good. As you can see on the screen, I have an example from Fabrice's Rapier Treatise. I'm not very well versed in rapier techniques myself and don't know that many rapier manuals, so I'm going to reference this manual a lot as you'll see it has a lot in common with our hero here. As you can see here, this is relatively the same exact stance. Dagger presented forward, rapier retracted back a bit, left foot presented forward. The one thing that I would recommend the Peacekeeper do is present the dagger more, as there's a lot more range that she could be working with. That being said, this is almost a 1-to-1 of a historical treatise, and that is a win in my book. Next, we have a left and right guard. I'm grouping them together because they share a lot of similarities. She has relatively good footwork, she still has the lowered stance like we see in the historical examples, but we see that in both her weapon placement is strange, to say the least. In both the left and right guard, she places one weapon rearward and then has the other weapon slightly presented forward. Like I said before, I don't have much experience with rapier and dagger. In fact, I don't have that much experience with dual wielding weapons at all. But from my amateur point of view, these stances look counterintuitive. Having a weapon rearward isn't inherently an issue. We covered this concept recently with our Highlander and his rearward guard. Having a sword pointed backwards can give your opponent a false sense of security and make them misjudge the true reach of your weapon. This issue with the stance, in my opinion, is she severely limits her options with her arm placement when she doesn't have to. In her current stance, her rearward arm is on top with her forward arm on the bottom. The issue is that this restricts the forward arm if they have to quickly defend or attack. In my opinion, I would switch the arm placement so that the rearward arm is on the bottom and the presenting arm is on the top, allowing full presentation of the forward arm and still allowing the rearward arm to strike if need be. Again, I might be wrong with this assumption, and maybe this is some 500 IQ technique that I'm just too much of a plebeian to understand, so take it with a grain of salt. Next, we're going to look at blocking. I don't expect there to be any amazing blocking techniques because, like I've said in the past, the block animation has to be something that can make sense for a variety of weapons. So if they make it look like some dainty little block with a dagger and the attack is a swing from a massive kanabo, then it would just look odd every single time you blocked. I bring this up because she essentially does the Hollywood-esque double weapon block where she crosses her sword and dagger in an X shape to stop an attack. To my knowledge, this doesn't actually work, but for gameplay reasons and having to make an excuse on how a hero is supposed to block anti-armor weapons, I'll let it slide. The point of having 2 weapons is that you can use one to defend and the other to attack. There is a reason why in Rapier and Dagger, the dagger is called a parry dagger. Now, just because it is called a parry dagger doesn't mean that you have to do exclusively that. Otherwise, they would just bring a shield or something. If the opportunity arises where you can use your dagger to attack while you're defending with your sword, then you can capitalize on that technique. Speaking of parries, the parry in-game is relatively more of the same, using the X shape to control the opponent's weapon and then displace it. The fundamental idea isn't bad, but the execution is not good. There's a reason why parry daggers have the elongated and curved crossguards. You should be able to parry and then manipulate the opponent's weapon with just the dagger alone. If you're using both weapons to defend yourself, and then by the time you're done defending yourself, both you and your opponent have recovered at the same time, then you essentially are back to square one and no one gains anything. Defense and attack have to be simultaneous if you want to win. Speaking of attacks, let's look at Peacekeeper's light attack options. Now, there is a lot to unravel, so we're going to take it one at a time and look at them all individually. We'll start by looking at some of the opener lights. Before we look at all the opener lights, let me just start by saying that a large majority of her attacks are slash and cut based, not thrust based like you would assume with Rapier. Most people see a Rapier and assume that it is a thrust only based weapon. That is just not the case. Although the Rapier does lean more towards thrust based attacks, it is fully capable of slashing as well. In fact, there are even certain manuscripts that explain some scenarios where you would perform a cut in Rapier fencing. That being said, would you perform as many cuts as Peacekeeper in Rapier fencing? And the answer is probably not. But Rapier is also almost a generic term at this point, when some people would just assume that something is a Rapier because it has a complex hilt. For example, a side sword has a lot in common with the Rapier, but it has a much wider blade. If you're wielding a weapon like this, that could constitute using a moveset like Peacekeeper's. I don't want to delve too far into the type of swords there are, because I'll cover that in a dedicated video when we look at her sword options. I just want to bring it up here to show that although she takes inspiration from Rapier techniques a lot, she also has other inspirations for her moves as well. Now with all that out of the way, let's take a look at Peacekeeper's top opener light. It's pretty solid, especially from the guard. From neutral, she has a lot of moving to do, but that is to be expected for pretty much all the moves from neutral guard because it exits the top guard to do it. Next, we have the side opener light. I don't know why they have this rearward dagger if all she was going to do is slash with the sword anyways. It seems pointless. In fact, I can't even think of a move from this position that incorporates the dagger. More on that later. Next, we have the left side light opener. This one is great because it actually does incorporate the left side rearward sword guard, and essentially does a backhanded sword strike. Looks good to me. Next, we have the follow-up lights, starting with the top guard. As you can see, she swings with the top opener light, which is fine, and then she follows up with a spinning dagger slash. Now, a lot of heroes have the infatuation with spinning, so that isn't anything new, but I'll explain why this is stupid in a second, so just hold this thought. Next, we have the right side follow-up light, again adding a spin to it. It honestly doesn't look that bad here, mostly because of how hard she's overswinging her sword. She's essentially halfway through the process of spinning anyways, so it looks fluid at least. Next, we have the left side follow-up light, which is the coup de grace of it all. There is no spinning, and a proper stab, which would probably be more effective than slashing because it is a dagger. I'm so confused here. If this was possible all along, why didn't they always do this? No matter what side you're opening from, you won't spin on your follow-up side light. It's not like you can't perform a dagger stab from any other side without spinning. This is just one of those odd design choices that make me really want to sit down with Yubi's fight choreographer and ask some questions. Next, we'll look at the heavy attacks. The openers really don't have much to talk about because they just look like slowed down versions of the light openers from all sides. The heavy side finishers are really flashy and use spinning, but setting that aside, the spinning has quite good form. We just talked about spinning quite a bit involving larger weapons in the Highlander analysis, and one of the key things when spinning is footwork. Honestly, Peacekeeper moves very fluidly like this, so in that sense, I think it's very well done. The top heavy finisher is another story. I like it for all the wrong reasons. She literally has hang time when in the air like it's some sort of action movie. It looks so ridiculous and cheesy, but I can't help but love it. Next, let's look at the side dodge heavies. They look pretty good. They use the weapon that is on the side that she's dodging from. So if she's dodging on the dagger side, she uses the dagger. If she's dodging on the sword side, she uses the sword. The posture and stance looks good, as it really looks like she's going for that rapier-esque lunge with these attacks. I only have two small issues. One, she's using her dagger in these lunges, which isn't inherently bad, but considering when you're lunging, you're trying to maximize your reach, it is odd that you would use your shortest weapon. Second, when she dodges to her right, she uses her sword, which is obviously good considering the previous statement, but now this even further invalidates the right side guard stance with the dagger pointing rearward. Seriously guys, I need to know what move in her kit capitalizes on this dagger and her arm blocking herself. Next, we have her forward dodge heavy. I can excuse the glidiness of the side dodges because I'm just assuming that this is the real world equivalent to sidestepping, but I can't excuse the jumping into the air to perform a jump attack. I have said this many times in my previous analysis, but I will say it again. There is no tracking or hitboxes in real life. If you try to jump attack, you will impale yourself on your opponent's weapon. Next, we have the zone attack, arguably one of Peacekeeper's most used moves in her kit, at least from neutral. But it has some flaws. For starters, spinning. And this one is really bad, because you can see, especially after the first hit, she spends a lot of time facing away from her opponent. Also, this is a move that could technically be performed without spinning, but most likely is just done because it looks fancy. Next, let's look at Dagger cancel. This essentially adds a stab mix-up into any heavy cancel. I actually like this a lot. Like I said, stabbing with a dagger like this is going to be a lot more effective than it would be with slashing. So making it a move that is so critical to her kit I think is a nice touch. Let's be honest, if you're playing Peacekeeper, you are getting nowhere without applying bleed to your opponent. So this just further shows how you can perform a stab from the top as well. So why finisher lights, except the left side, don't do that, I don't know. Doubling down on this, I just learned about Deep Gouge. I'm writing the script on a time limit, so I'm not going to go back and change it, but essentially it is what I was talking about, incorporating the dagger into a stab. That being said, it still doesn't use the rearward dagger pose to the right side guard. Putting that aside though, this is further doubling down on that rapier duelist persona, and I like that a lot. I would have preferred the dagger to be all stabbing, but beggars can't be choosers, and I will accept this over nothing. Anyways, moving on, we're going to look at the triple stab, but before we look at that, I want to just quickly bring up the guard break. So usually a hero will guard break their opponent by pommel striking them or stunning them in some way, but Peacekeeper here just walks up and grabs them.
Here's your receipt, sir. Will there be anything else?
I don't know, I just find it strange. Anyways, back to the triple stab. It's iconic and has been in the game forever. And the way she says "Parry" is probably one of the most iconic voice lines next to "Ad mortem inimicus." But let's be real here. No one is going to let you roll up on them and start stabbing them. Even if you got close enough to do something like this, you'd be lucky to get at least one off. Especially since if you don't directly hit them in the heart or artery, they won't die immediately. Depending on the internal wound, they wouldn't even die immediately even if you hit them in the heart. So sorry to break it to you guys, but I'm going to have to say that this myth is busted. No, but actually it realistically doesn't make any sense. It's still really cool though. Last thing we'll talk about is the guard break throws, by far ending on the most ridiculous note. Let's start with the most simple one, and that's the backwards throw. This is simple in the sense that she isn't defying physics or logic. She is simply elbowing the opponent in the back of the head. Is it the best guard break throw? No. But is it making more sense than the next one we'll be seeing? Yes, by far. Next, we'll look at the side throws, because in concept, I like what is going on here. She's pushing off the opponent, not just to displace them, but also to create distance between herself and the opponent. I like this idea when imagining she's fighting someone twice her size, like Lawbringer or Shigoki. The practicality behind it and the actual physics behind it, though, would probably prevent something like this happening in real life. Still really cool regardless. Finally, we have the forward throw. It is literally just walking up the opponent. No one is stationary enough for you to run up them like you're in a 1980s martial arts movie. They would surely fall down before you got the flip off, especially if it was a scenario like a guard break where they're already stunned and they were displaced. Also, just like her top heavy finisher, there's way too much hang time in the air for her to still be in that one place. She's literally floating as she walks up her opponent. It's insane. With that said, it's still ridiculously cool though. That's going to be it for this one. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. Shout out to my YouTube members, particularly Grant Burke, Vodka Lover 420, and Shadow Eagle 04 for being the highest tier of members. If you'd like to become a member as well, the join button is down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button as it helps get the video out to others. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or thoughts on our resident kidney collector, then go ahead and leave it down below. Like always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Peace.